Welcome to Letter to Philippi Live, our daily broadcast looking at Paul's letter to the Philippians. And we are just about getting started. We are up on all of our feeds. So, welcome to Letter to Philippi Live for today. Mondays, we're starting a new week of looking at Paul's letter to the Philippians. And we are glad to have you here. We are live on Facebook Live, Instagram Live, LinkedIn Live, YouTube Live, Twitter Live, and streaming live on our live streaming page on our website, lettertophilippi.org. My name is Sean Emslie. I'm the founder of Letter to Philippi, a new Messianic Jewish theological teaching organization, and I am the teacher of this class as we go daily, Monday through Friday at 12 p.m. Pacific time, through Paul's letter to the Philippians, verse by verse. This is now our fifth time going through the letter to Philippi. Since we began on June 1st of last year, June 1st, 2021. And this time through, our fifth time through, we're going to be going one verse per day. So there are 103 verses in Philippians. So that's 21 weeks so we'll be going into the summer with this time through, taking 4 to 5 months to go through verse by verse, one verse per day, through Paul's letter to Philippians. In our previous 4 times, we did up to 6 verses a day, and sometimes had classes up to an hour long. These classes will be, for most of our classes will be about 15-20 minutes. And when we get into chapter 2 and chapter 3, the larger theological sections, we could have 45 minutes to an hour classes on individual verses. But this time through, we'll be doing one verse per day. So that's how we'll be taking care of it this time. And this is an ongoing study that we'll be doing continuous through Monday through Friday, going through the book of Philippians here on Letter to Philippi Live from lettertophilippi.org. So we'll begin with a word of prayer, and we'll look at Philippians chapter 1, verse 6 for today. O Lord, you are good. We thank you. We bless your holy name. We thank you for each day we have to look into your holy word. We thank you for these words of your servant Paul. Help us, Lord, to become more and more and more the Messiah each day. And help us, Lord, to be emulating our Messiah, one whose holy name we pray. Amen. So again, for those joining us now, this is Letter to Philippi Live, a daily Monday through Friday live stream broadcast on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and at lettertophilippi.org as we go verse by verse through Paul's letter to the Philippians. The letter to Philippi that Paul wrote around 62 of the Common Era, and we're taking these words written almost 2,000 years ago and looking to apply them to our life each day. So we're looking at Philippians chapter 1, verse 6 today in our ongoing study. As we're looking at Paul's introduction to his letter to the Philippians and sharing with them about his love and heart for them. And we'll be looking at verse 6. So I'll get started with that. And put that up on the screen. Okay, now we can put it up on the screen. And we read, and I'm sure of this, that the one who began a good work among you will keep it growing until it's completed on the day of the Messiah Yeshua. They're reading in Philippians 1, verse 6. And I'm sure of this, that the one who began a good work among you will keep it growing until it's completed on the day of Messiah Yeshua. So Paul here is attesting to the faithfulness of the Philippians, and that their faithfulness to God and their faithfulness to the Messiah will be continued and will continue to grow until the Messiah's return. Their faithfulness, their trust in Yeshua as the Messiah of Israel will continue to grow. And Paul is assuring them this, that they, as they stay faithful to the God of Israel, their faithfulness will continue to grow as they continue to seek to become more and more like the Master, more and more like Yeshua, their model and their Messiah. And Paul says this will continue to grow, and they will see the fullness of their salvation and resurrection to eternal life in the presence of God and the Messiah Yeshua. And Paul's saying that they've begun, there's a work in their life, there's a new work in their life, that they have come to know the God of Israel. As I said, many of the people in Philippi were coming from pagan backgrounds where they worship idols, they worship demons. They were involved in the emperor cult, worshiping Nero, the Roman emperor, and participating in all kinds of ungodly acts, unrighteous acts, unholy acts in service of these gods. They have now come to know the God of Israel. They have come to hear the message of the Messiah. They've embraced the Messiah of Israel. They embraced the God of Israel, and and a new work has begun in their lives. As we read this again in verse 1 through verse 6. And I'm sure of this, that the one who began a good work among you will keep it growing until it's completed on the day of Messiah Yeshua. So these people in Philippi that Paul is writing to, they have come to know the God of Israel. A new work has begun in them as they have come to know the God of Israel. They have gone from being pagan Gentiles, worshiping the gods of Greece and Rome, and worshiping demons, to now being redeemed Gentiles, those who embrace the God of Israel, the Messiah of Israel, and have ordered their lives according to the scriptures of Israel. A new work has happened in their lives. They've gone from death to life. They've gone from sin to righteousness. They've gone from paganism to the faith in the one God of Israel. And this new work has begun in them. And Paul says this new work has begun in you, and it will continue to grow in you as you can keep on the path of becoming more and more and more like Yeshua, righteous Messiah. So Paul says that a new work has happened in you, but it's not a one-time work, but it's a continuing work of God, and you can be confident that because of your faith, trust in Yeshua, that Paul's assuring them of their faithfulness of the Philippians, their connection to the God of Israel will continue to grow to them until they come to the fullness of their salvation in the resurrection of the dead. When the Messiah returns, may it come soon. That when the Messiah returns, they will see the fullness of their salvation. They're continuing, the work that began in them will continue to grow and grow and grow. And finally, we'll see its fulfillment. We'll see its full flowering when Yeshua, our righteous Messiah, returns. And Paul shares with him the expectancy that Yeshua returns soon, and uses this sense of expectation as an extra level of assurance to the believers in Philippi, especially those who, like him, were facing persecution for their faith. So Paul here is giving them the assurance that the Messiah will return and that his return will be soon. And this is a word of encouragement to them, that they, like Paul, were suffering for the faith. They were being persecuted for the faith. Some, like Paul, were even dying for their faith. And Paul giving them this assurance that their faith will continue to grow as they stay faithful to the God of Israel. They will and they seek to become more and more like the Messiah. But this work that began in them, this work of redemption in their lives, will continue to grow until that full flowering when the Messiah returns and they see the fullness of the salvation. They see the fullness of the new life. They will see the end of suffering, the end of death, the end of sin, and the fullness of the Messiah presence, and the fullness of their salvation will be revealed on that glorious day when the Messiah returns. Paul's confidence in the return of the Messiah and the full flowering of the salvation and atonement in their lives and the becoming like the Messiah is rooted in his trust in God's faithfulness for redemption and his firm conviction that Yeshua is the source of that redemption. So Paul here can affirm to the people in Philippi that they have this new life. They have this work of God that has begun in them that will be fully realized when they see the Messiah. And he has confidence that is based in God's faithfulness, that God has shown his faithfulness to the Jewish people from the time of Abraham to this various day. God has been faithful to his promises to the Jewish people. And Paul, based on God's faithfulness, based on God's faithfulness to the Jewish people, his promises to the Jewish people that have been fulfilled and are being fulfilled and will be fulfilled, Paul can have confidence to assure the Philippians, and us reading this letter nearly 2,000 years later, that the redemption is secure, and that he has, based on God's faithfulness, the firm conviction that Yeshua is the source of redemption. Paul can share with them God's faithfulness can be seen, worked out in the redemption of Yeshua. Yeshua, as the Jewish Messiah, is the greatest picture of God's faithfulness, the greatest source of God's showing his love, showing his faithfulness to his covenant, is in sending Yeshua the Messiah. Yeshua the Messiah is the marker point of God's faithfulness. The greatest marker of God's faithfulness is Yeshua the Messiah of Israel. Yeshua as the one who brings the atonement, the one who is the Messiah of Israel and the Lord of the cosmos, is God's full imprimatur of his faithfulness. The greatest sign of God's faithfulness is that the Messiah, Yeshua, came into our world, gave his life for our full atonement, rose from the dead to conquer death and to conquer evil. And now he sits at the right hand of the Father, waiting for that glorious day when he returns to rule and reign forever from Jerusalem. In that renewed world, it is the empty tomb of Yeshua the Messiah. It is the atoning death of Messiah and the conquering of death of Messiah that is the marker of God's faithfulness. And Paul can say to the people of Philippi that yes, this work of redemption has begun in you. It will continue to grow until that day when the Messiah returns. And I'm confident in that because of God's faithfulness. And the greatest sign of God's faithfulness is the Messiah of Israel coming to our world, laying down his life, conquering death and sin, and rising from the dead to give us the assurance of new life, the assurance that the redemption is assured. And as I said, Paul can affirm that through their excellent work, the Philippians will continue to grow in their faith and life and service to Yeshua. Based on their faithfulness, Paul can also affirm that they are seeking to become more and more like the Messiah. They're not passive in their faith. They have come to know the Messiah of Israel, and it's not a one-time acceptance of Yeshua the Messiah, and then they go on with their lives and continue to live as Philippians in the pagan world of Philippi. In essence, that they had said a prayer, and basically they had their fire insurance from hell, and now they'll go on with their lives. Paul says, no, you've shown that you've come to embrace the Messiah of Israel, and are now seeking to become more and more and more in the Messiah. That you are continuing to seek to grow in your faith. It's not you've made a one-time commitment and gone on with your faith, but this is a continuing work in their lives for them to continue. That through their work, they're showing by their work of making the Messiah known, by their living as counter to the pagan culture around them. Paul can say that they're continuing to grow in their faith and service, and this shows that they're becoming more and more and more like the Messiah. The fruit of their faith and the life of service shows that they are continuing to grow and become more and more and more like the Messiah. Paul can see that they are taking their faith and living it and making the Messiah known in their lives in Philippi, throughout Macedonia. All those that come in contact with them, they're shining as lights in a dark world. They are continuing the work of Paul. Though Paul is in prison in Rome, they are continuing to do the work of making Messiah known in Philippi and around the world. And in this, they're showing their faithfulness to the God of Israel. Paul therefore has confidence to assure them that they're standing now and their future completion when the Messiah returns. So not only can he assure them based on God's faithfulness, based on God's fulfilling his promise, his greatest fulfillment of his promise being the sending of Messiah Yeshua to bring full atonement, to bring the redemption, bring the final redemption to the world through the atoning work of Yeshua. He can also affirm them by their lifestyle, by their living to become more like the Messiah, that day of glory when they see Messiah and they enter into life eternal is assured based on God's faithfulness to them, and they're showing their faithfulness to God, that they are demonstrating that they are redeemed, that they have been brought out of the world, they have left the pagan world to enter the world of the God of Israel and the faith in the Messiah of Israel. So they are living examples of those who are looking toward that final day, the day of Messiah Yeshua, when he comes and the world to come begins and life eternal is made full reality. They see the full fruit, the full flowering of the redemption. The day of Messiah Yeshua is mentioned here. And the day of Messiah Yeshua takes the day of the Lord references to the one God of Israel throughout the Tanakh and demonstrates that the divine nature of Yeshua, the day of the Lord and the day of Messiah Yeshua, become, in Paul's teaching, references to the lordship of Yeshua as the end-time judge of the created order. As Paul says here, we'll read Acts 1 through 6 again. He says, "And I'm sure of this, the one who began a good work in you will keep it growing until it's completed on the day of the Messiah, Yeshua." So Paul here is looking toward that day, the day when the full flower of the redemption is known, the beginning of the world to come, the beginning of life eternal in the Messianic kingdom with Yeshua reigning and ruling from Jerusalem in a new heaven and a new earth. And he references that day as being the day of Messiah Yeshua. And here he takes the day of the Lord language from the prophets and now applies that to Yeshua the Messiah. The day of the Lord and the day of Messiah Yeshua are one and the same. The Yeshua, the Messiah of Israel, will be the end-time judge of all the created order. And in this we see Paul making clear reference to Yeshua being the divine Messiah. Yeshua is more than just a man who came into the world, but he is the very God of Israel who entered our world, fully human, fully God, entering into our world as the divine Messiah. That he was eternally divine. He was eternally one with the one God of Israel and came into our world to live a life of humility, to die the death of a slave on the Roman cross, and to rise from the dead to show the conquering of both sin and death, and now to be ascended to the heavenlies and soon to return to rule and to reign on a new heaven and a new earth. And we'll see more about this end time exaltation of Yeshua and his end time rulership and judging of the world in Philippians chapter 2 when we look at the Messianic hymn. But Paul here is giving a hint of that glorious day when the Messiah returns, when Yeshua, as the end time judge, rules over and judges all of the created order, both seen, unseen, and those on earth, those in the heavenly world, those in the demonic world, Everything will be judged by the end-time ruler, Messiah Yeshua. And on that day, the righteous will be vindicated, the evil will be punished, and life eternal in the new heavens and new earth would begin. And Paul here can share with the people in Philippi, and us by example, that by their faith trust, God has shown his faithfulness in the Messiah of Israel. The Messiah of Israel is the greatest demonstration of the faithfulness of the God of Israel to his promises, to his covenant. The greatest example of the faithfulness of the God of Israel is Yeshua the Messiah, who is the Messiah of Israel and the Lord of the cosmos. And Paul can assure the Philippians, and us by example, that by faith trust in Yeshua, we have entered fully into connection and relationship with the God of Israel. We've embraced the Redeemer, Yeshua, our righteous Messiah. And in the embracing of Yeshua the Messiah, we have full atonement. We have the guarantee of life eternal, the guarantee that a work that has begun in us, the work of redemption, will continue to grow until that final day when Yeshua, our righteous Messiah, returns. And we will see the full flowering of that redemption in the world to come, in the new heavens and new earth, with Messiah Yeshua reigning and ruling from Jerusalem. And Paul can say also, the people of Philippi demonstrated that the new work had begun in them by their faithful living, by their making Messiah known in Philippi and throughout Macedonia, and living as lights in the dark world of Philippi. Paul can assure them that they are showing the new work has begun in them, that will be fully realized when the Messiah returns and the beginning of life eternal. And Paul says that they too can look forward to the day of Messiah Yeshua. And we too, who have put our faith trust in Yeshua, who know the new work that has begun in us, the work of redemption that we have brought from darkness to light, whether Jew or Gentile, has entered into faith trust in Yeshua, that we have been granted full atonement by the work of the Messiah, the one either to be a Messianic Jew or a redeemed Gentile. The work of the Messiah on our behalf has been done. Redemption has been achieved. A new work has begun in the life of those who put their faith trust in Yeshua. And in so doing, there is the guarantor of that fully flowering, that new work fully flowering in eternal life with the Messiah Yeshua on that glorious day when the Messiah returns and we enter into life eternal with him, who is our Messiah and King. And Paul here is telling people of Philippi and us by example to embrace the Messiah Yeshua, embrace the work that he's done, begin that work, accept the new work in your life, seek to continue to grow, to become more and more like the Messiah, with the assurance of God's faithfulness that you will see the day of Messiah Yeshua and know the life eternal because of the work of Yeshua, the Messiah of Israel. The atoning work of the Messiah is complete. And for those who have put their faith trust in him, that new work has begun. New life has begun in you that will be fulfilled because of the faithfulness of God. The faithfulness of God is shown from Abraham to this very day, is fully realized in the person of Yeshua the Messiah. And Paul can tell the people of Philippi, and us by example, that in embracing the Messiah of Israel, we're embracing the fullness of the atonement that only he can provide, that only God can provide, only the God of Israel can provide full atonement. And Paul is telling the people of Philippi, they have had that new work begin in them. They're seeking to grow in their faith to become more like the Messiah. They're making the Messiah known, living as lights in a dark world, and waiting for that full flowering of that redemption in their lives. And Paul calls us today to accept Yeshua as the Messiah, to embrace Yeshua as our Redeemer and our Messiah and Lord and King. Embrace him as Messiah by faith, trust. Seek to become more and more like him each day, to become more and more and more in the Messiah, and confidently look forward to that day when the Messiah returns and see the full flowering of our redemption on that glorious day, the day of Messiah Yeshua, when sin and death are finally wiped clean from our world, and the fullness of the Messiah, fullness of life in the Messiah of Israel and the God of Israel, in the atonement of Yeshua. So in this verse, we've seen Paul speaking about the importance of the people in Philippi to understand that they have put their faith in the Messiah, and a new work has begun in their lives, and they are guaranteed life eternal by the faithfulness of God. And Paul affirms them for taking on this new faith, embracing Yeshua, and living for him in their world. And he calls them to continue to become more and more like the Messiah until that final day when they see Yeshua in the world to come. And for us too, we need to accept the work of the Messiah in our lives, accept the atonement that he provides, so that new work begins in us. And we need to continue to seek to grow it by becoming more and more like the Messiah as we too wait for that glorious day, the day of Messiah Yeshua, when Messiah Yeshua, our righteous Messiah, returns to enter into the world to come, the new heavens and new earth, where Messiah rules and reigns in a world of righteousness with unending life, death defeated, sin defeated, evil defeated, living in the renewed world, the world to come, with Messiah Yeshua ruling and reigning. And may that day come soon. Amen. So thank you for listening to our class today. This here again is Letter to Philippi Live, a daily Monday through Friday, 12 p.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Phoenix time, 2 p.m. Chicago time, 3 p.m. Winter Park time, 10 p.m. Jerusalem time, and 10 p.m. Johannesburg time for those in South Africa. We go verse by verse through Paul's letter to Philippians, one verse per day this time. So as I said, this is verse 6 of 103. So there are 97 more classes on this time through the book of Philippians. So we'll continue on. We'll look at Philippians chapter 1, verse 7 tomorrow in our ongoing study. And today we saw Paul telling people in Philippians about the new work that's happened in their lives. He affirms them for living that in that new work and growing the new work in their lives, and gives them and us the assurance of the full flowering of that new work in our lives when Messiah Yeshua returns. We look forward to that day. So that will conclude our time for today here at Letter to Philippi Live. And Letter to Philippi Live is an initiative of Letter to Philippi, a new Messianic Jewish theological teaching organization, which I'm the founder and teacher. And you can find more about Letter to Philippi at lettertophilippi.org. 1L, 2 P's in Philippi. There you can watch past class videos. You can ask any questions. We have a contact form. You can leave prayer requests when we're praying for you. You can make a contribution to our work on our giving page, either one time or an ongoing contribution. We would truly appreciate that, as we are an independent organization, not funded by any outside sources. So we're dependent on those who watch our classes to support our work. You can read our mission statement, what Letter to Philippi is all about. You can read our Messianic book reviews. And as I said, if you have any questions, we have a contact form. You can ask questions, you can leave prayer requests, and we want to be available for you. And on our resources page, we have our Messianic commentary on Philippians you could order, which is the basis for this class. And again, if you have any questions, just go to lettertophilippi.org. As I said, that's 1L, 2Ps in Philippi. And we will see you tomorrow as we look at Philippians chapter 1, verse 7, as Paul continues his opening words of encouragement to the people of Philippi, sharing about his deep love for them, sharing about their working together for the Messiah. And tomorrow we'll be looking at Philippians chapter 1, verse 7. So thank you for watching. Have a great day. And we will see you tomorrow, 12 p.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Phoenix time, 2 p.m. Chicago time, 3 p.m. Winter Park time, 10 p.m. Jerusalem time, and 10 p.m. Johannesburg time for those in South Africa. Here on Letter to Philippi Live, lettertophilippi.org, an initiative of Letter to Philippi, a new Messianic Jewish theological teaching organization. My name is Sean Emslie. I'm the founder of Letter to Philippi and the teacher of this class. Shalom for now. See you tomorrow. Have a great day. And we will be with you and looking at Philippians chapter 1, verse 7 tomorrow here on Letter to Philippi Live.